one of the non-church entities we are connected to via the PCUSA is the Presbyterian Foundation. The Reverend Sandra Moon is here today with us from the foundation. She is our very own ministry relations representative. Her services are available to all of our churches free of charge. All you need to do is ask Sandra, and I'm sure she would be happy to engage with you. But yeah, Sandra's going to talk to us today about stewardship in the church and share some fresh ideas for kickstarting your stewardship program. So Sandra, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Sherry. I want to start our time in prayer, and I am reading a prayer. This is my favorite prayer book. Oh, I don't know if you could see it. Okay, Prayers Encircling the World. We'll do it again. It's published by Westminster John Knox Publishing, and it is literally a collection of prayers written by people all over the world. So today I'm reading a prayer from Canaan Banana in Zimbabwe. I invite you to pray with me. Open my eyes that they may see the deepest needs of people. Move my hands that they may feed the hungry. Touch my heart that it may bring warmth to the despairing. Teach me the generosity that welcomes strangers. Let me share my possessions to clothe the naked. Give me the care that strengthens the sick. Make me share in the quest to set the prisoner free. In sharing in our anxieties and our love, our poverty and our prosperity, we partake of your divine presence. Amen. All right. So just to give you a little roadmap of what we'll be doing today, I'm going to share a presentation, and it's a condensed version of my Creating a Culture of Generosity presentation that I often do with church sessions. And in this presentation, we're going to talk briefly about stewardship foundations. Then we're going to look at some giving trends, not just for church giving, but across the board for all nonprofits. And then we're going to look at some best practices, and then I'll share some resources that are available at the Presbyterian Foundation. But before I jump into my presentation, I would love to hear from you all about how does your church do stewardship? What is your stewardship approach? Do you even talk about stewardship in church? So if a few of you can share, and then you can just unmute yourself and share. And then Sherry, during the presentation itself, if anyone has any questions in the chat box, if you could let me know.
I'll monitor the chat for you, no problem.
Thank you. So let's start. If anyone is willing to share, how does your congregation do stewardship?
I put my hand up, but I don't know if that makes any difference or not. What we've done in the past, and I will say that this is my first year to be stewardship elder. In the past, it's been a letter that's been sent to all of the members of all the people involved in the church, not necessarily just members, but people who attend regularly. They're not administrative members. In addition to a general letter about the church needs, we also include a time and talent survey and ask people to mark on it and return it to the church the areas they're interested in for service. So that's how we develop then our committees for the following year. And that may be generally what other people do, but that's just what I'm aware of.
Great. Thank you for sharing, Priscilla. And so I'm assuming that this happens in the fall?
Yes, it's the letter usually goes out in September, and then we'll have a dedication or a recognition of people's giving pledges. Not that anybody knows what they are, but they are put together and presented, I guess is the best word, at a church service, so worship service.
Thank you.
Just along with thanks and prayers, that will survive the next year.
Wonderful, thank you. Greg?
So at First Pres, the traditional way has been we have a dedication Sunday, which is usually the second Sunday in November. And before that, for 4 Sundays, we have speakers talking about why they give to the church, what motivates them to do that. We put together a brochure and then sent out a pledge card and other information about a week and a half, 2 weeks before the pledge dedication Sunday. We do time and talent too, but we don't actually link it to the stewardship pledging campaign. And then we also link the dedication Sunday to our annual meeting. So it's a pretty big day for the church when people bring it up as an offering during the middle of the service. This year, we're trying something different. A lot of people don't pledge. It's not something that's as common as it used to be. We have a number of people who are non-pledgers who regularly give, and we are going to expand the pledging process to include them and encourage them. If they're already given, but not pledging, great, but maybe want to increase their gift. They want to increase their gift or consider being regular givers. We also have a giving endowment fund, which people can sort of pay forward their pledge, and part of that comes back every year to support the church. And then just recently, we took over the Legacy Builders program, which is separate, but it still is getting people to think about their commitment to the church, either today, their living commitment, or the future as they move on. So that's sort of a snapshot at First Pres Portland.
Thank you, Greg. Maybe let's get one more person to share. I think Sharon, I saw your hand pop up.
Okay, yeah. So last year was the first year that I headed up the stewardship campaign, and it came from a tradition where there was always a theme associated with stewardship. And at Plymouth, stewardship season, it was like the month of October. And so in talking to the pastor, a theme sort of just organically came out about the hopes and dreams. And so then each Sunday I had the session elders share their hopes and dreams for Plymouth Church. I had an opening message, and then pastor preached on that one Sunday. And then I typed up what they had said, or asked them to email it to me or something, typed up what they said, and then sent that out to everybody, or gave it to everybody kind of as a summary, a follow-up. Here's what the hopes and dreams were. And then, like everyone else said, you have a dedication Sunday where you turn in your pledges. But I just wonder how I'm going to follow up this year, because that was just such a great theme. And I'm like, oh, I hope I could come up with I guess it shouldn't be, the Holy Spirit move us, the pastor and I, to come up with a good theme for this year. But that was, and then we had the scripture from Jeremiah that, for I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord's plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you a hope and a future. So tying a scripture in with it.
Wonderful. Thank you. John, I did see your hand up. So if you would like to share, we can, I'll take one more story of how your church does stewardship.
Well, similar to some, but what we've tried to do is a couple times we've asked the congregation to help us develop the theme of what we're looking for. And we're doing that again this year. We post out a phrase or something, and we ask for feedback on what the congregates are feeling that makes that theme come together and what they want to go for. And then we focused on our ministries, talking about what they have used the funds for during the current year and what their expects are for the upcoming year, so people have an idea of what they're pledging for and where it's going. And we didn't do that in October and November. We spread over a 5, 6, sometimes even a 7-week time period, and then end with a dedication Sunday.
Great, thank you. Thanks for sharing, everyone. And I'm curious, how many people get excited about stewardship? And you can be honest. Okay, see a couple hands. That's good. How many people view stewardship as something that needs to get done? Okay, I appreciate that.
That'd be done.
Yes. Well, so my hope for today is, so first I want to share that a very common model, and one that most of our churches have done for at least the last 50 to 60 years, is just that stewardship Sunday in the fall. Maybe a couple weeks leading up to it, you share some stories. Maybe your pastor preaches about stewardship. But typically, most churches, even today, still just do a fall pledge Sunday and kind of move on with their lives after that. And one of my hopes from today's presentation and today's conversation is that we get a more holistic understanding of what stewardship means for the life of our faith, and that maybe you take away a few things that you can do to start looking at stewardship year round versus one season or one Sunday in the life of the church. So I'm going to share my screen and then we can get started. All right. Can everyone see this? All right. Let's see. So for those of you who aren't familiar with the Presbyterian Foundation, we were established in 1799 to oversee the long-term financial interests of the Presbyterian Church. We are one of the 5 denominational agencies. I need to get an updated flow chart, but right now I kind of created my own so that the OGA and the Presbyterian Mission Agency is now the interim unifying agency. And you can see the other agencies listed there. So we're the financial and investment branch of the PCUSA. So I serve the Northwest region. So all those states in the brighter blue in the Northwest are mine. I relocated to Portland from Louisville, Kentucky, where I lived for about 18 years. I arrived on January 1st, and I'm now a member of the Presbytery of the Cascades. So it's good to be able to present this for my home presbytery. While I'm new to the region, I'm not new to the role. I previously served the Cumberland region, which is that other shade of blue, the Kentucky, Tennessee, and Virginia. So if you have Presbyterian friends across the country, and if you think that what I'm sharing today is valuable, encourage them to reach out to their ministry relations officer so they can connect with them and get some resources. Here's my contact information. That's my cell phone. I always say email is the best way to get a hold of me because I am on the road frequently for work. So trying to get me by phone or text can be challenging. But if you email me, I'll let you know I'm available to chat. I live in Northeast Portland with my partner and our dog. We had 2, and then 1 crossed the Rainbow Bridge on Friday. So still grieving that loss, but I'm joyful to be here with you all today. Okay, so part 1 of this presentation, we're going to talk about what is stewardship. So do I have any brave volunteers who will take a stab at defining or describing what stewardship is? Any brave souls? Peggy.
Stewardship is gathering and managing resources to help fulfill the mission of the church.
Great, thank you. Anyone else? Antoinette.
Encouraging people to get engaged with the church with money or in other ways.
Excellent, thank you. So I always like to start with kind of basic dictionary definitions. So if you look up stewardship, if you put it into your Google search bar, it will probably come up that stewardship is the careful and responsible management of something entrusted to one's care, being a steward. My favorite definition of stewardship from the faith perspective comes from the book Embracing Stewardship. And it's stewardship is the multiplicity of ways that the people of God live out God's mission in the world, using all of the abundance that God has entrusted to them. And so stewardship, how do we shift from understanding stewardship as turning in our pledge on a Sunday in the fall to being an essential part of Christian discipleship? Stewardship is about gratitude. It's thanking God for all of our abundance. And it's viewing that, understanding our lives of faith as having a God of abundance versus scarcity. It's about making intentional choices in our lives because we know that the choices that we make reflect our values. It's about caring for all that God has entrusted to us. And I know often we hear those 3 T's, time, talent, and treasure, but I encourage you to think of a 4th T, testimony. Because if we've been entrusted with the good news, it's part of our joy and our calling to share that good news. And in sharing the good news, I love I think it's St. Augustine who says, preach the Bible at all times, if necessary, use words. And a 5th T that someone suggests to me is, what about ties? What are those relationships that you can foster and nurture? What I love about stewardship in the Christian understanding is that stewardship is countercultural. I want you to think for a moment of the outside world. What does most of the messaging of the outside world tell us? I think most of us can't turn on the TV or flip through social media without someone trying to sell us something, right? Telling us that we don't have enough of something, or we need the newer model, that we need more. We know that we live in a consumerist culture, and that the outside world tries to define us based on our status, our wealth, and what we have. But we know as people of faith that our calling is to love God and to love neighbor, and to understand that everything we have has been entrusted to us by God, and that we should use all of our gifts to the glory of God and to love and care for others. So now we talked about a bit what stewardship is. Let's talk about what stewardship is not. Even though it's a very common practice to do stewardship, to limit it to one season or one day, stewardship shouldn't be just a once-a-year event. And it shouldn't just be about meeting a budget. Stewardship does not equal fundraising, but today we are going to talk about some fundraising best practices and things that we can learn. And stewardship at its heart is not about money. Again, it is our response and gratitude for all that God has given to us. And when we come to how do we understand what stewardship is and what stewardship isn't, we're good Presbyterians. We turn to Scripture. I like this verse: honor the Holy One with your wealth, the first fruits of all your crops. That reminder that we always give back to God first in celebration and recognition that all we have is given to us from God. I know for those who do themes for your stewardship campaigns, you've probably used a bunch of scriptures. I have several scriptures, but this is probably one of the most common ones, that verse from Matthew, for where your treasure is, your heart will be also. I think it was something at 1 in 10 verses in the Bible have to do with stewardship, with possessions, money, and our heart's condition towards wealth. So how do we live out stewardship in congregations? Some of you shared with how you do that. And these are basically those 5 T's that I shared earlier. So the time and talent, we serve in leadership roles, we participate in worship. It's show up and get involved. The treasure and the resources, supporting your congregation financially. And then beyond just the annual giving, maybe consider leaving your congregation or another ministry that's near and dear to your heart in your estate planning. And I'll touch very briefly on planned giving towards the end of this presentation, and why planned giving is an increasingly important part of church stewardship. Testimony. Again, share the good news of Jesus Christ and share how your congregation is living out its call. And ties. Connect your friends and family with your congregation. So stewardship is encompassing really of all of the ministries that we do in our churches. And so I want to make sure that we understand stewardship broadly. That being said, my expertise is in the area of the treasure and resources. So I am mainly going to be talking about that treasure aspect for this presentation. But just remember that when, as I suggest moving towards a year-round model of stewardship, just keep these other forms of stewardship in mind and how we live it out, because that will be important. So I want to hear from you all. I want to know, what is your first memory of stewardship and who taught you stewardship? Maybe you can take 2 or 3 volunteers.
I think my first memory is of giving during Sunday school. We always made sure we had, I don't know, whatever we had available left over from our allowance, or maybe we found a few pennies here and there. But that was always part of attending Sunday school, was giving.
Great, thank you. So Priscilla, was it your Sunday school teacher who taught you to bring those pennies, or was it your parents?
It was probably my mother.
Okay.
Yeah.
I remember as a youth feeling really important that I had envelopes to put the money in that were my envelopes. Again, in Sunday school. And who taught me about stewardship? In a way that I remembered, I learned during our stewardship drives at the church I'm at now, because and what I learned because the messages during the season oftentimes came straight from the heart. And so I have found that to be very effective.
Thank you, Eileen. Bronwyn, did you have something to share?
Yeah, my earliest memory, and I wouldn't have called it stewardship, was my mother putting the money in the envelope for giving. And that's just what you did. I don't recall stewardship campaigns from when I was growing up. When I left home, or at least when I was a teenager and was earning my own money, then I started giving to the church, but not pledging. I hadn't really heard of pledging. So the most I've learned about stewardship is since I've been here at John Knox, and I didn't jump out of the way of that bus coming down the road, and I had to lead the stewardship campaign, which was very uncomfortable for me, but with a lot of help from Eileen and others, and sort of, learning on the job.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to share? I have 3 early memories of stewardship. One similar to what's been shared, but my mom would hand me the envelope each week, and I got to put the envelope in the plate as the plate was passed in the pews. So it was my mom teaching me that it's important just to give, and that's what we should do as Christians. My second memory is my childhood pastor during the One Great Hour of Sharing season. I remember during the children's sermon, my pastor passed out those cardboard fish banks, and he told us how every mealtime we should say a prayer to thank God for the food that we're about to eat. We should pray for those who are going hungry in the world, because there's a lot of people going without food. And to place a few pennies in the fish bank to thank God and also to provide for others. And I remember with joy bringing my filled fish piggy bank to the offering table on Easter Sunday. And in reality, there's probably $2 or $3 worth of pennies in there. But I remember that feeling of joy and pride of giving back to others. And my last stewardship memory doesn't have to do with money, but I don't know why, but I know why. My mom would always sign me up to do special music at church. I play the piano to this day. I do not like performing in front of people, but my mom would sign me up regularly. And I remember asking, Mom, we have a paid pianist. Why do I have to play the piano? And my mom said, Sandra, God has given you a gift and you need to share it with others. So between the stories I've shared and ones you've heard from others, I hope you gather this idea that I believe that we are all created in God's image, so we are generous and loving individuals, but stewardship is something that we're taught. So as we think of who taught us stewardship, we should also think of who do we need to teach stewardship to? And it's at all ages. So Bronwyn, I appreciate that you said that you learned a lot about stewardship, just being involved with the stewardship committee and learning from other members of your church. And then when we also think about those first stewardship memories, a couple of us mentioned that that passing the plate, just that visual reminder and putting an envelope in a plate. How many of your churches do envelopes these days? Okay, a few. Okay. How many of you have stopped passing the plate in the post-COVID era, or maybe before? Okay. Yeah. And so I'm not saying that you have to go back to envelopes and passing the plate. Church changes, and I'm glad to see that churches evolve based on their need. But if you're no longer doing those things, and if that is a core stewardship memory of people in certain generations, what are you doing in the life of worship that creates those stewardship memories for the next generation of givers or to people who are new to faith? So those are just some things to think about. My last question for this section is, why is giving to the church important to you? So you are on this call, you are giving of your time to learn how we can answer the call to be generous. So why do you give both of your time, your talent, your treasures? Why do you give to your church? Peggy?
I think the church does good things, and I want to help make that happen. And of course, we're not the Rotary Club. We believe in Jesus Christ, and it's as a Christian, we do things, and I want to do my part.
Thank you. Anyone else? Why is giving to the church important to you? Antoinette? Oh, you're on mute. Oh, and now you might be
It's a
frozen.
wit by giving to my church. I'm still on mute.
Oh, you're good. Good.
Okay. So to me, it's a witness, and giving to my church the possibility to be a witness in Vancouver, Washington, by our mission outreach.
And what kind of mission outreach does your church do?
Well, we have Family Promise, we have a food pantry, we have a Saturday morning breakfast with neighbor, which is free to anyone showing up. We no, we support we sent to the mission for the Presbyterian Church. We support Friend of the Carpenter, which is a place for people to be during the day and do some work with wood. What else?
That's wonderful.
It's a long list, and I should know because I'm on the mission committee also. But, and we support some missionaries. We had contact, but it's changing, with someone in Uganda and someone in Indonesia that we were supporting.
Thank you. So you give to the church because you believe in the missions that you are supporting.
Yes.
Thank you.
One of the things coming from a very small church that has always echoed with me is, and although Special Offerings uses it as a theme, we do too. If we all do a little, it adds up to a lot. And that has just been critical for my understanding that if I can do what I can do, and then we can all do it together, we can accomplish so much more. And that's just feels like you're contributing to a thing bigger than yourself.
Thank you. I give to the church because I say the church transformed my life, my family's life, and continues to do so. My parents were first generation Korean Americans, and I grew up in Toledo, Ohio. It was a very white community, and my church became our extended family. I had 3 sets of church grandparents that I was always so excited to see and get hugs from every Sunday morning. It was a place where we felt welcomed, we belonged, and they made us their own. And just all the support my family received. My parents and my older sister, I was born in the US and my younger sister, but my parents and my older sister were undocumented immigrants for the majority of my childhood. They came over on a student visa and overstayed their welcome, and they made the decision to stay in the States because, for all intents and purposes, they had 3 American children who would not thrive if we had to go back to Korea. And my church, the session members and some other key members of the church, they all wrote letters on my family's behalf to the federal judge. And I remember going to court. At that time, I was in 8th grade, and the judge just saying, he said he read every single letter that a church member wrote about how important our family was to the church community, and how loved we were. And the judge just shared how blessed he felt that he could preside over that case. And my family is still here. So if it was not for my church, I think that my family's story would have gone very differently. So I think we have to believe in the work that our church is doing, whether it is outside mission, whether it is that sense of community inside, or how you connect with others who may not have a home elsewhere. So let's move from our understanding of what stewardship is to some trends that may be helpful for us to know. I've pulled these. There is a very comprehensive report about the state of philanthropy in the world, or in the US. It's called Giving USA. And so a lot of these statistics are from that report. So the long running trend over the last few decades is that the dollars are up, but the number of donors is down. And inflation is continuing to impact even if the dollars are up, it may not adjust for inflation. A trend to note is that at the beginning of the 21st century, the majority of Americans gave to some kind of charitable organization. But today, that number is under 50% for the first time, and it continues to trend downward. So that kind of makes me question, what is it about giving and generosity that we're not teaching to younger generations? And there's also just the reality that millennials and Gen Z and Gen Alpha are raised in very different economic circumstances than the older generations. Another trend to note is just the preference for online giving, especially among Gen Z and millennial donors. How many of your churches here have an online giving program? Okay, if yours is not, that's something that as a session you should try to commit to offering some kind of online giving, because not only can it increase the means by which that you support your mission, but also it allows people to fully participate in the life of your church, because a lot of younger adults and maybe some of you on this room don't carry cash and have never had a checkbook in their lives. So that online giving component is important. Average individual giving, it's kind of varied through the years based on just the economic circumstances of that year, but it's always hovered around that 2% mark. And you can see that the 2% is a far cry from our biblical call to tithe, that traditional 10% of your income. And I'd say that Presbyterians aren't much better than the average giving rates. We always hover around 1.9 to 2%. And you may hear that giving to churches is decreasing, and that is true, but religious organizations still receive the most charitable gifts. I believe that religious organizations receive 26% of all charitable gifts. Some other trends to note are generational trends. So we have the boomers, builders, the greatest generation, where if you look at that loyalty, it's built into the fabric of who they were raised to be. So you give to the church because that's what you do. That's what you do as a Christian. That's what you do as a member of a church. But we started to see a shift with Gen X, where Gen Xers are notorious for being suspicious. So they don't give just because that's what other people do. They're going to ask questions. What is my money being used for? I want to see, is it worth the investment? And then we can see that trend kind of continue in different ways with millennials and Gen Z, where that built-in loyalty to a church or a denomination isn't there. Millennials generally tend to have loyalty towards people, and Gen Z loyalty to values. So something why this would be important is in your messaging, in your communications about why people should give to the church. So if your church does an annual fall appeal letter, how many congregations here, and you can raise your hand, does the same letter go out to every member or regular attendee of the church?
Yeah.
That's common. It's one form letter that's sent out to everyone. I would recommend that maybe you take that letter and maybe you just take one paragraph and alter it to different age groups. So those builders and boomers appeal to that loyalty as that responsibility to give back to the church because that's what God calls us to do. But with Gen X, maybe you lift up a program. This year, through our feeding program, we fed 5,000 individuals in the Portland community of Irvington. I don't know. So lift up that impact story about a program. For millennials, maybe you want to think who's going to be that person to sign that letter for the appeals letters who go to millennials, and maybe highlight the story, an impact story of an individual who's impacted by the ministry of your congregation. And Gen Z, what are your values and how do you live them out? If your value is justice, how does supporting the church financially help promote that value and live into that value? So again, it's a lot of work to have a different letter for every generation. But again, maybe you can alter just that one paragraph. I see some of you taking notes, and that's fantastic. Also know that Sherry's going to email you the slides to this presentation, so you don't have to write everything down. Any question about any of these trends that I've shared? No? Okay. So another trend is that increased competition. Now, back in the 1970s, even 1980s, and earlier, most people gave to their worshiping community because churches would then take that money and meet the needs of others in the community. But we know that today there is a nonprofit for every interest and passion under the sun. I'd love to hear from some of you. What are some of the organizations that you support financially that aren't your church or another church organization?
A small health clinic that's sort of a neighborhood small health clinic that serves vulnerable people.
Thank you.
The local food bank. We not only do we once a month as a congregation gather up food to be delivered to them, we also give a financial gift every month. Especially now with the funds that are being cut, they are in greater need than they have been in the past.
Southern Poverty Law Center.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we all have organizations that aren't our congregation that we support financially. And so this makes us think about those organizations that you support. What kind of messaging do you get from those organizations? It's that why. Why are you giving to those organizations? And I think that secular organizations do a much better job of communicating impact and where your dollars will go. And that's something that churches can learn from, that how do you set your congregation apart? Why should people give to your congregation? And we'll look at that some more in this presentation, and we can discuss that afterwards as well. What do you think are the top 3 reasons why somebody gives to an organization?
Relationship would be one.
Relationship?
You believe in their cause.
Yeah,
In
wish.
the cause.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the top 3 reasons why people give to an organization, the first is making an impact. So you believe in the cause and you believe that the money you give is going to make a difference. The second reason is, this may surprise people, but financial stability. And the best way to understand this is that people don't want to give money to a sinking ship. And now think about this in the messaging of your congregations, because I have met a lot of faithful elders in churches who say that, well, they just get up in December and they say what they need to meet the budget, or else they may have to consider staffing cuts or cuts to mission giving or programs the following year. And I understand where that comes from a practical perspective, that you need money to meet your budget. But if you can see that that donors are influenced by financial stability, that message of, hey, we're not doing well and we're going to have to change things if we don't get more money, that doesn't build confidence in the organization. So while that may be true to your congregation, you want to focus more on that number 1, that making an impact. How will your gifts that you give make a difference in your church and your community? And the third is believing in leadership, not just your pastor, but as church leaders. You all are here because you're leading the church in some way. So that puts some responsibility on your shoulders to lead by example and to be good models of stewardship. So some takeaways is that trends in giving are changing. We know this in our own context. So our stewardship practices need to change. If church has changed drastically in the last 30 years, and we're still using stewardship models from 30 years ago, we're probably not meeting the changing needs of our church. And so let's look at some ways that you can adopt maybe some best practices from some secular organizations and from our understanding of what stewardship is as people of faith. So in the secular fundraising world, has anyone been in that world? Well, there's a distinct cycle. You identify your prospective donors, you cultivate the relationship, you make the ask, and then you thank them. And we can adopt this model in the church world, and it's actually easier in our congregations because it's built into the life of our church. And this is something that instead of going in this identification, cultivation, invitation, recognition circle, we do this year round and all the time. And the identification piece is easy. Who has a stake in your congregation? Who are your members or your regular attenders? And when I say who has a stake, I know that some of your churches may have community groups who rent space from you or share space from you. So don't count them out when it comes to supporting maybe certain projects at your church. The cultivation piece is that most important piece because it's building those relationships and sharing the stories of how your congregation is loving and serving others. So you want to find ways to share what your church is doing. You want to create energy around mission activities. And this not only strengthens giving, but it strengthens those other T's, the time and the talent. And you want to invite people to get involved. When it comes to telling our story, we need to do this often and in different ways. So some of you've shared that in the fall you might have someone come up and maybe share what organization you're supporting or what mission you're supporting or some impact that the church is having. But how can we do this year round? Your pastor can preach about generosity in all its forms regularly. I know that many churches do minutes for mission. Something I suggest is that a lot of churches, when it comes time for the offering, we say beautiful words of liturgy that are more just words that we're used to. Everything we have is given to us from God, so let us now give back a portion of what is God to the work of the church in the world, something like that. But what if you took an extra 30 seconds and shared a ministry that your church supported in the life of your mission in the past week? You could get up and say, this week we had 80 people come to our midday feeding service. A gift to the church supports feeding neighbors in our community. Please give generously. So you can think of ways to do just to share those impact stories during the regular life of worship. If you have social media, don't just use it to share special events or post a video to your worship service. Share those stories of impact. How are you getting involved in the community? You can do it through your newsletter, through testimonials during church, during Sunday school. Share those stories of why your church is important and the good work that you're doing. When it comes to stewardship, church leaders have different roles. So pastors, are there any pastors in this group? Okay. So pastors, talk about your own stewardship and preach about generosity regularly. Again, it doesn't just have to be financial generosity, but think of those other T's. Don't be afraid to invite and ask people to give. And that gratitude piece is important as well. Now, this last bullet point, this is probably what I get the most pushback from anytime I do this presentation. But ideally, pastors should have full access to giving records. And how many of your churches, how many is that true? Does your pastor have full access to giving records? Okay, it's mixed. That represents national trends. It's roughly 50% of PCUSA churches, the pastor has that access. The other 50%, they don't have that access. I'd say if your church is one that is not going to budge on that, a lot of churches have a history of financial trauma, and there's a reason why they don't let their pastor have that information. Again, I'd still encourage you to reconsider that, and we can chat another time if you want some more details about that. But if your pastor does not have access to giving records, whoever does have access has to let the pastor know if there is a change in giving patterns. So if someone has been a faithful donor for years and all of a sudden their giving stops or it drastically changes, that could trigger a need for pastoral care in that person's life. And it's important that the pastor checks in with that person. Or on the flip side, if someone has only given nominally for years and all of a sudden this big gift comes in, that's an opportunity for that pastor as the leader of the congregation to thank that individual and to learn more. Where did this gift come from? So again, you can email me if you want to chat more about that. But again, that is a best practice. When it comes to session, share your stories. So when you're thinking of how do we share the story year round, be willing to offer up your story and why you serve as a church leader and why you give financially to the church. This is probably the second point that I get the most pushback on, but I am a firm believer that every member of session should give at a personally meaningful level. I don't say tithe. We're all at different economic abilities, and that fluctuates during our lifetime, but at a personally meaningful level. So if you have a member of session who is not giving to the church, it may sound harsh, but they don't need to be serving on session. And again, it goes back to leadership of the church. You have to practice what you preach. And if you are not financially supporting the church, how can you expect others to? And how can you ask others to give when you're not giving? So ideally, congregations should have a generosity or stewardship team. And for the majority of churches, I'm seeing a shift in this, but the majority of churches is the finance team that also does stewardship. And I say sometimes you have people whose gifts overlap, but the gift of the finance committee is really different than what the stewardship team does. Because the stewardship team's primary job is to share stories, share those impact stories to cultivate those relationships. So in the ideal structure, your stewardship or generosity team would be made up of a member from all the other committees or major areas of ministry in the church. And then that team gathers those stories and figures out how to share those stories with the congregation. And this should be a year-round committee. I may have frozen for a second. I think that the stewardship team should meet year-round and share those stories year-round. It shouldn't just be a fall activity. Now, I'm realistic. I know that a lot of congregations are small and it's the same 5 people who are volunteering for everything. And the thought of adding one more committee is too daunting. And I understand that. So an alternate structure is that at the start of every session meeting, just go around the room and share what are the ministries that are happening? What are the stories that need to be lifted up? And maybe you have a generosity elder who is the one to actually coordinate that storytelling and sharing of those stories. Any questions about stewardship committee or alternative structure? No? Okay. So this thank you piece is really important. It should be done by the pastor. It should be done by session. Find creative ways to say thank you. I think the most impactful way that that an organization thanked me, it was my alma mater, Louisville Seminary, and I used to work there. And giving to the seminary to this day is important to me because it had such an impact on my life. And one year I got an email message with a link to a video, and the video clip was just 20 seconds long, but it was a current student who thanked me by name. She said, "Sandra, thank you so much for supporting Louisville Seminary. Gifts from donors like you helped to support my scholarship, and I wouldn't have been able to come to seminary otherwise." And they shared just briefly, they want to be a hospital chaplain and just thank you for your prayers and ongoing support. And it was just so meaningful to know that that just to be thanked by name and to see the person that my gift was helping. So there are creative ways to say thank you, but a very simple practice would be just to start every session meeting, pass out some thank you notes, and write a thank you note to someone in the congregation. Write it to Mary for teaching Sunday school. Write to someone for offering special music. So find ways to express gratitude. Let people give in a variety of ways. We touched this briefly, but cash, check, securities. And if you need help with any of those other forms of giving, reach out to me and I can offer some solutions. On your website, this is Strathmore Presbyterian Church in Louisville, Kentucky, but that Give Now button is at the top of the page. There's no confusing where it is. If you have a giving link on your website, which I hope you do, don't make people hunt around for it. Make it clear, make it simple. When it comes to budget, how many of your congregations use a narrative budget? 1, 2, okay, 3. Great. Okay, I love to see that a few. So a line item budget, you need to do that. It's a tool for accounting purposes, but a line item budget doesn't tell the story of your congregation. People see 2 big numbers. What are those numbers? Staff salary, paid staff, and building expenses. But those numbers don't share the amazing ministries that your church is doing. So with a narrative budget, I generally recommend picking out 3 or 4 ministry areas. So it could be Christian education, worship, pastoral care, those important ministry areas for your church. And then you allocate staff time and budget to those. So you can say 30% of your gift goes towards providing pastoral care to members in our church community. And I have a really easy a tool that will make that really easy for you that I'll share in just a moment.
I discovered that the narrative budget for a church as small as ours was almost self-defeating because, of course, our budget is primarily the pastor's salary. But what we did do, and Bronwyn and I did this for several years, and maybe it's time to kind of do it again. We took the building as our method of expressing stewardship and said, look what your building is doing in the community by hosting this and this and this. And we talked about each program, but not a strict narrative budget because it was self-defeating to do that because it pointed out exactly what you didn't want to point out.
Well, I think that can be helpful. So when you say you look at the pastor's salary, but how is the pastor's time being used?
Right. And that's how we took it rather than trying to put the percentages on them. That was what was hard for us. We didn't get into the nitty-gritty numbers. We just said, this is what is happening from this resource. This is what's happening from this resource. And we left it at that. And that worked better than trying to do a real strict narrative.
Yeah, and I think a narrative budget can also be a discernment tool. So if you're trying to do those percentages and you're like, oh wait, our pastor is using 80% of their time for Sunday morning worship and very little in other areas, maybe that makes you think, is that what the priority for our church is? Or do we need to have a greater conversation shift that? So yes, a narrative budget can be both an important tool to ask for generosity from others, but it can also be a good internal tool to see how are our resources being used, and is this how we're being called to use them? So thank you for sharing that. Okay, we talked about most of these, but again, stewardship campaigns, let's find ways to move towards that year-round approach instead of just a fall pledge drive. Part of that is teaching tithing. I know that can be a scary word, and I have a whole other workshop on tithing if you want to hear that sometime. But also teaching our members about financial planning and debt management, and how, as people of faith, how do we use our resources to support ourselves and to do the work of God in the world. Okay. So I'm going to talk very briefly about planned giving, and why I want to include this is that it's probably no surprise, but the majority of congregations in the coming years, and your congregation may be feeling this already, most congregations will not be able to support their ministries and their annual operating budget based on regular annual giving alone. And so that's why planned giving is important, because it is an invitation to your church members to continue to make an impact on the ministries of your church even after their death. And it's important for in our own lives as we consider what kind of legacy we want to leave behind. So a planned gift, a legacy gift, to kind of use those terms interchangeably, it's a major gift. It can be made during a donor's lifetime, but more commonly at the time of death. So a bequest no will is the most common one. Why it's important? So when you think of a person's giving to a church, annual giving comes from these very small pieces of the pie, checking savings. Maybe if you're in your 70s, you're from your IRA. But we know that we can't take our stuff with us when we die. So what happens to these big pieces of the pie that we hold on to during our lives to support each other? It has to go somewhere. If you have minor children, it should go to your minor children. But if you don't have any dependents, consider leaving a tithe to your church or other nonprofits that have had an impact in your life and that you believe is doing good work. An average planned gift is 200 times the size of a person's largest single annual gift. And that makes sense when you see these pieces of the pie and what percentage we're talking about. So huge potential for impact to your church. If you accept planned gifts, make sure you have the right policies in place and you want to faithfully use your endowments. I'm kind of speeding through these because I know we're short on time, but I do want to share a few resources. So, Greg? Yes.
Something that just struck me, because I think people have a concern that the current congregation can't support the church. But if you think about it, almost anything you go to, like plays, concerts, many activities that are going on now, aren't supported by your tickets that you pay for. They're supported by other things that have gone on. And I think we just need to think about that in a different way at church, because up to now, the local congregation has supported everything, but that's not the future.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. That is a great point. I like that comparison. Okay. So the foundation, there's links again. You'll have these slides that you can go to these links. This is something, a Stewardship Navigator, some of you all might be signed up, but it's a completely free resource. You can just go search your congregation by city, city and state, and you could register for free. And it gives you some tips for a year-round approach to stewardship. On Stewardship Navigator, there's also Narrative Budget Builder. So if you haven't used a narrative budget before, you can just go on here and click 3 to 5 mission areas, insert some information, and it'll come up with a very basic PDF of a narrative budget. I say if you have anyone at your church, or if you're good with programs like Canva or Adobe and can jazz it up a bit, it makes it really easy. Let's see. Also on Stewardship Navigator, we have the building blocks of a planned giving program. So, and then also in this resource library, there are sample policies. So the 3 policies we recommend are endowment policy, investment policy, and gift acceptance policy. Church FLA, you can register for free. The passcode is PCUSA. My colleague describes it as the Netflix of church finance, which sounds boring, but it's important. And there's good videos about stewardship, and there's church treasures videos, things like that. Plan Giving Navigator, most churches don't need this. This is a fee-based service if you're really interested in developing a plan giving program and the branding is really important for you. It's a one-on-one service. Stewardship Kaleidoscope is an annual ecumenical stewardship conference. It is a fabulous conference, and I say that as a biased person because I chair the conference. So, but it's planned by leaders from the PCUSA and the ELCA. This year, it's in New Orleans. You can see our plenary speakers there, and we have close to 40 workshops that are being offered. We do offer a virtual version, but I do recommend, if you can, to attend in person. If your pastor attends, they can apply for a grant that'll cover 50% of all costs, registration, plane fare, hotel room. And if your pastor goes, that grant can extend to members of your congregation. If you can't attend this year, in 2026, it'll be in Baltimore. That is all that I have today. I'm sorry for taking up a little more time. I always like to leave with this piece of scripture from Isaiah 43. Forget the former things, do not dwell on the past. See, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs up. Do you not perceive it? So I know that our churches are facing a lot of challenges, but I pray that you all have the faith to see God amidst the new things, and that you're willing to try new things to support the amazing ministries that your congregations are doing. And I am available I will stay on for questions. Again, my email address is sandra.moon@presbyterianfoundation.org. So you can always email me for a time to talk. If you want me to do this for your session, this presentation, I have a slightly longer one that I love to do. You'll benefit that I am local, so it's easy for me to get places. But reach out to me. I'm happy to come preach at your church, do stewardship or planned giving workshops, to look at your policies if you have any questions or need help editing brochures and things. So reach out to me, and if I can help you, I will gladly do so. That's all that I have. Thank you. And again, I'll stick around for a few minutes if anyone has any questions.
Thank you.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
So can you talk to me about what other staff would be involved? So I know it's session and a lot of that, and finance committee and whatnot. What staff should be involved in the process, and how can they help and support stewardship campaigns?
Mm-hmm. So I'd say at the very minimum, it should be your pastoral staff. So your head of staff, and even associates. If you have an associate who is particularly in the area of Christian education, it's still important that they're involved with stewardship, because we know we can teach stewardship in our Sunday school classes and other opportunities. So I'd say definitely any pastoral staff, all of your session members. If your church has trustees, get trustees involved as well.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions? Okay, well, if there are no other questions, I just want to thank you all for your time and attention. And please reach out to me anytime that you have any further questions.
Thank you, Sandra.
Thank you, Sandra.
Thank you.